recording here in December, we'll top 80 episodes. We've been doing it for just about 18 months. And it's been pretty awesome, actually. I mean, people have been willing to come on. They tell their story, which is the first part of every interview we do. The first half of the podcast is their transition story if they were in the service, or how they got into military transition space if they weren't military. And so that's super powerful for the veteran community.
Welcome to Be Bold Branding, where we discuss the power of differentiating yourself through your own unique story and standout personal brand. If you're a military veteran who's transitioning back to civilian life, or you know someone who is, today's episode could literally change lives. Our guest is Shawn Welsh, a retired Army veteran of over 20 years who has made it his mission to educate others about the 45,000 programs available to veterans as they exit service. Let's find out how and why he got started in this quest.
Shawn, welcome to Be Bold Branding.
So happy to be here. This is great.
Yes, sir. And also, thank you for your service.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We really, really appreciate that. And the topic today that we're going to talk about is really fascinating. And when Tanya told me sort of the background of it, I was really fascinated to dig into it a lot deeper. But let's start with you, since that's really where the conversation begins for us. Tell us why you joined the Army 20 plus years ago.
The $1 million question.
Right.
So actually, my dad was career Navy. So I grew up in a military home, never had anything against the military, but honestly, that wasn't the path I thought I was taking. I was planning on trying to be an A&R rep for record label in Nashville. Actually, I wanted to go find new talent. And I was actually managing one of those old Sam Goody music stores at the time when 9/11 happened. I just finished college. I was about a year out. 9/11 happened. Decided, I'd probably need to do something a little bit more important than what I originally thought of. So I decided to join the military. Didn't know if it was going to be a career. Didn't know if it was just going to be, a 4-year hitch, but, hit the halfway mark at 10 and decided we might as well do 20 at that point. So here we are.
When you came back to civilian life, tell us a little bit about your transition out of that.
The difference, I think, in my transition started with the fact that I came in at 28. I had already been in the civilian world. I'd already gone to college. And so I was always friends with a lot of the people who were retiring. So most of my career, I was having conversations about getting out of the military. So that definitely helped me when it came time for me to transition out. Through the course of the transition, about 6 months in, we started the Vet SOS podcast to focus on the transition space. And I had the benefit of hearing all these stories, all these horror stories, what not to do, a good 50 interviews that I did before I finally left the military. So I learned a lot of what I shouldn't do. And I actually had a very, very good transition, and in many cases overdid it. I wound up doing about 26 different programs through the 2-year transition part. And that's quite excessive. But in all, it was exactly what I was hoping it would be. And we hit all the marks we wanted to, including, moving to Jacksonville, Florida, where we wanted to retire. And of course, the pay and job security that we were looking for.
That's super interesting. So if I got this right, you started a podcast even before you got out, or you were prepared? Oh, that's great. That's super, super thinking right there. So tell the audience, how many vets are transitioning each year, roughly?
So roughly it's 200,000 a year get out of the military, transition out one way or another, whether it's retirement or just doing a certain number of years and getting out.
Wow. And you mentioned, I think in some of the material I was reading about Vet SOS is that the government doesn't tell you about all these organizations. And as you're transitioning out, how did you find out they existed?
So I will clarify, I'm not knocking the government in that sense. We're talking about 40,000 plus 45,000 organizations. The government just can't possibly tell you about all of them.
Exactly.
And that's a mix of profit, nonprofit, and so you have a whole thing going there. There's a handful of things that you do learn when you start the transition process. So if you start with the USO, which is on every base, they have a Pathfinder program. And through that program, they start pointing you in the direction of certain things. There's a couple organizations that they have agreements with. And so they'll push you there. So you start to learn. And then when you go through what we call TAP, the Transition Assistance Program, each branch of the service has it. It's mandatory. One of the things they really start pushing on you is LinkedIn. So whether you want to do it, don't want to do it, they push it on you anyway. And some of us, I got really into it. other people hardly touch it. But as I started doing that and started reaching out to people who were already retired and what have you, I started learning about some of these organizations. And then I also had the benefit of a good friend of mine being about 6 months ahead of me. So I just grabbed onto his coattails and went for a ride when we first started.
So I can take, like, looking for nuggets of super, super important things. One of the things I think I can pull right off of the bat with that is, number one, you should do it. Right? You should do something, because I mean, so many of us in life we get good advice from sound people that know what to do, and then we're like, LinkedIn, I mean, we're all guilty of it, right? And so I think that's something that's, but I would think it could be like extremely overwhelming when you do think about even 5 things that you could do, or organizations that help you, much less 45,000 or well over 40,000. That's a lot to start delving through. And is that what SOS primarily does? Talk to us a little bit about that.
So the whole reason we started the podcast was to highlight the various organizations in the veteran transition space. So essentially I could do 40,000 interviews and not run out of guests, which is kind of a good place to be, I guess.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So we started reaching out to some of the organizations that I'd done programs through and trying to find a rep to come on and what have you. And so we're recording here in December. We'll top 80 episodes. We've been doing it for just about 18 months. And it's been pretty awesome, actually. I mean, people have been willing to come on. They tell their story, which is the first part of every interview we do. The first half of the podcast is their transition story if they were in the service, or how they got into military transition space if they weren't military. And so that's super powerful for the veteran community, hearing those stories and the horror stories, probably the worse, the better, actually, because it really gets your eyes open. But then we have them tell us about the organizations that they're working with. And, the whole goal is just to educate, because most of these organizations work with veterans. So it's not just people transitioning. They work with the transitioning service members, and they work with the veteran and military spouses. So, highlighting it for all those groups to say, hey, this is just information. It's free. You get on the website and click on an episode. You can listen to it. If you like the person talking, maybe there's a connection there. You want to go check them out. And the link to the organization is on the website as well.
That's awesome. Does any of them stand out to you? And you don't have to call names if you don't want to, but tell us a little bit about some of the transitional services that are necessary for our veterans coming out.
So I don't mind dropping, and none of these guys pay me. These are just, of the 26 organizations I did and all the things I tried to attend, I did develop ones that I liked more than others, or I thought provided a certain service better than others. And so you have Vets to Industry and 50 Strong are 2 great networking, and then the Key community down in San Antonio. So those 3 together do networking events online all the time. Some of them do some in-person stuff, but it really provides a great platform to meet fellow people transitioning, meet experts already in the field, and learn about new resources. So I always encourage people to check out those types of resources, because they're each doing at least one thing a month, which is great. So people can just jump in when they're available and catch what they have going on. We also have a great platform called Veterati, which is a mentorship program. It almost works kind of like Tinder, where you put in your profile and then it'll match you, say I want to be a project manager. It'll say you're a 90% match with this person who happens to be a project manager. And what you do is you set up a 1-hour informational interview, essentially, to talk to them about, whatever you want to talk about. And then, using that service alone, I was able to cross a whole bunch of things off my list that I knew I wasn't going to do. So it's just phenomenal, and it's free.
Yeah, because I would think you come out of the military, even if you served a good 4-year term or 8-year term, and not even just for a life or whatnot, you do have a skill set. And you're I'm wondering where I could put the skill set to work. Or maybe you had a skill set that you did for the military that is not what you want to do for the rest of your life, right? And so does it help you figure a lot of that kind of thing out?
Oh, absolutely. The greatest feeling in the world is that day you decide that you want to retire from service. It's just like this weight lifts off your shoulder. It's time to go. It's my time. And then the next day you wake up with this huge weight on your shoulders. What am I going to do
now? What?
So Um, Literally, through training, education, jobs, all that stuff, you could be qualified to do thousands of things. So,
Mhm.
especially if you do, 20 plus years in the military.
Mhm.
So that was really the second goal, I would say, in my opinion. The first thing is my wife and I wanted to make sure we knew where we wanted to live. That was number one for us. Once I knew where I was going to live, then I could worry about the job. And so once we decided on Jacksonville, then it was really working. I spent probably 6 months whittling down things that I didn't want to do. And,
Mhm.
so I got down to like 4 or 5 things that I said, you know what, I think I'd enjoy this. And so it was a process, and you just sort of have to work through it. And for me, my biggest job requirement was I wanted to enjoy going to work. I didn't want to go to work and be miserable. I wanted to enjoy going to work and, the people I worked with and the organization. And, I found it.
Tell me this, you mentioned LinkedIn, and actually you and I met through LinkedIn, right?
Yes.
You responded to come to a meet and greet session because we were looking for really good podcast guests, right? And hey, you end up here because you're a great podcast guest.
Oh, hopefully it works out.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Hey, it's already worked out as
That's
far as
right.
we're concerned.
Check that off the list.
That's right. So that is such a great place to network and to begin. But let's just say somebody just coming out of the military, like what are probably 3 top things that you would recommend that person do right away? And let's just put it this way. How soon before they transition out should they begin doing those things?
So I would say, one, get on LinkedIn, create a profile if you don't have one already. And there's plenty of free services available to us to help us make our profiles better. And I tell people all the time that it doesn't make an evaluation in the Army is just like your LinkedIn profile. You can ask 10 people. If it's good, you're going to get 10 different answers. So figure out what works for you, what you're happy with, what's sending the message you want to send, and run with that. And then on LinkedIn specifically, I call it targeted networking. You go to the spot where you can do all the filters, and I'll filter by location. So once I knew I was going to Jacksonville, I started really targeting Jacksonville a lot to meet people, and then specific jobs. I knew if I wanted to go in this field, so I just started really targeting who I was networking with. And then through that, the third thing that I would tell people to do is be open to opportunity. I was always, I was an Intel analyst when I was in, and always, I'm not gonna say I was risk averse, but I was very deliberate in the risks I took. And through the transition process, I made the conscious decision to get out of my comfort zone and try new things. And it actually started with the podcast because I never wanted the podcast. That was never something on my list to do. Someone was trying to sell me on it, actually, to create micro content on LinkedIn. And I've yet to actually make any micro content. But finally we decided to go ahead and do it. And it's been a true blessing. I never thought I would enjoy it. Never thought it's something I'd love to do, but I have so much fun doing it. And it's just, it's one of those things that I never would have tried it normally. And so I decided to put aside all my doubts and go, yeah, let's do this. And slowly we're building something that I'm really proud of. And it's just so much fun.
Well, and you should be proud of it.
You should.
And it seems to me like such a service, a necessary service. Sort of filter down that information, because it's mind-boggling to think that there's that many organizations that help is available, but you might not need all of that, right? And then also from a business standpoint, you've got that renewable energy source, if you will, because there's always going to be the military service, and there's always going to be people that are coming out of that service and need the information. So to me, it's fantastic.
When somebody comes to you, Shawn, and they say, okay, I'm, 4 months, 6 months away from exiting the military, tell me the process that you take them through to begin helping that person.
First question is, what have you done? Because maybe they're 6 months out, but they've been doing it for 2 years.
Like what you're hearing? Hit that subscribe button and learn how you can change how you're seen and charge what you're worth.
That's always the first question. What have we done so far? And sometimes it's nothing. Sometimes they have done a whole lot of things. So we start there. Once we know what they've done, then I usually have, I think everybody does in this space, have certain ones that they point people to. So I ask questions, like what they're looking to do. Have they had that discussion of where they're going to live? what kind of job are they looking for? And because you got to first find out if there's any clarity, because a lot of service members are just like me. When they made that decision, there's thousands of things I could do. I don't know what I want to do. And so you got to start to figure that out at least cross things off the list. I did a PMP boot camp, and I knew by the end of the boot camp, I was never going to have a PMP. So, I was able to cross that list, the project manager thing, all that off my list. So there's a lot of white space after that, but I always start with that, so where are they at? What have they done so far? What direction are they heading in? And then from that data, I'll turn around and recommend things that they check out. So if they're looking, or if they have a need to do more networking, it'll be organizations like Vet Industry 50 Strong, the Key Community. You have organizations like American Corporate Partners that provides a year worth of free mentorship. They team you up with somebody in corporate America. It's a fantastic program, and they don't use an algorithm. It's all based on the conversation you have with the person who works there, and they match you up, and very rarely do they have to reassign you. My mentor was fantastic. I still talk to him now. So it's just one of those situations where, we have great conversations, and I can always go back to him for more information. And then the Leader Transition Institute is one that I always recommend. They have a program called From We to Me. It's all about changing that mindset, because as soldiers in service, we're all about taking care of our soldiers. It's all about the we mentality. And at some point, when you're getting out, you have to at least think about yourself for a little bit.
Sure.
So fantastic program. Highly recommend everybody go through that one. And then the Commit Foundation is another good one that I've always recommended. They have a coaching service that goes along with their program, and you get that for about 6 months. And my coach was phenomenal. Once again, someone I still talk to. So, it's things like that I usually recommend, ones that I've personally used. But then I also tell them, don't just take my word for it. Go ask somebody else. Get two recommendations, because someone else could hate the program I recommend.
And there's so much out there, but the key is taking advantage of that too. I know I was in the auction business heavy, especially during the debacle and mortgage business, real estate business, and we employed. I never get this right, Shawn. Retired Marines, they're not retired. Former Marines, they're not former.
Not former.
I never got it. I never got
Always
it right.
a Marine.
I never got it, but yet they're not with the Marines. I never got it right. I think they were messing with me. But they were, the 4 leaders of the company were all lifers that had returned. The company, we hired them knowing, number one, they had full pensions. So we got a lot of really good leadership out of that, and a collective 100 years worth of leadership. They got stipends that were incredible, all of them well above 6 figures or whatnot. Everybody won out of the process. But I thought it was really smart of our chairman when he said, we need to hire, our leadership for this company needs to be people who have led people, and who better to go to than a government trained leader. So, and that had been in it for life. I thought it was a really smart move. So I know there's a lot of opportunities like that in America for people that have that kind of strong skill set, and where to put that best at play, and enjoy, like you said, enjoy what you're doing. Because no matter what we do, we should enjoy what we do, or we shouldn't do it. I mean, I will always encourage organizations to at least talk to veterans about hiring them.
Obviously you still got to make sure you got the right personality fits and what have you, but there's a lot of things that veterans bring to the table that aren't necessarily measurable. Like being able to make decisions on the spot when, say, the copy machine doesn't work and nobody knows what to do. A lot of times a veteran will jump right into action. We've seen it happen. The other population there, though, that people often forget about is the military spouse community. Now, they have a lot of gaps in their employment, but they have a lot of volunteer time that fills up those gaps, or simply managing the home while the service member is deployed. I mean, I would never have wanted that job. I was home with my boys for about a weekend, and I was ready to, call my wife back in. I can't do this.
I'm going back. Please send me on deployment. Please.
Well,
we agree with you 100%. Yeah. Like, we have tapped into that resource dozens of times, because we've had key personnel in the BrandFace roles,
and contractors
and contractors and subcontractors that we have used, even like contract work, as well as employees that we have hired. And honestly, 75% of everybody we ever hired to work with has been veteran spouses, because they have a hard time finding employment, but yet they are really good at what they're doing. And people are like, well, you're just going to get transferred in a year or 2 years or whatnot, and I'm going to spend time training you. I don't want to hire you. Especially a virtual based business like we are, we have found them to be incredible. And they have such of a network that you can tap into that network, and usually you start getting hits just like that, and you have a really strong pool of workforce that has the skill set to do it. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's a super good point.
So this is a time to segue into this. So you mentioned clarity earlier, and you mentioned, the first thing you do is kind of get clear on where your clients are. This is kind of what we do in the personal branding world, is we bring, help people bring clarity to, okay, who do you serve? How do you serve them? What qualifies you to do that? How does it make their life better, and what makes you different, right? So a lot of those things are answered in the branding process. So now that you are kind of headed in this direction where you're helping other veterans, and you're in the process of building your own brand to be able to do that as well, Shawn, what one piece of advice would you give people about personal branding?
I go back to the personalities, like the DISC assessment. Those people who have that I personality, this type of branding, I think, comes a lot easier, especially with social media. Whereas I was an Intel guy for 20 years, I've hardly touched social media. I stayed away from it because I saw how much trouble people would get in doing stupid things. So now I'm out, and my partner on the podcast is telling me I got to make a TikTok video or an Instagram video. I'm like, how dumb I feel holding the phone and talking to it. It's like I can talk to anybody, just like this, but you put that phone in my hand and I'm trying to do this, I feel so silly. But I'm trying really hard to do it. We didn't have a budget yet. Like, we just officially made the podcast an LLC. In our tent, with doing that is, to help cover the expenses, obviously, that, you have from the different services you use, like StreamYard. So we found a military spouse who has a marketing degree, but doesn't have a whole lot of experience. So she's volunteered to come on to help us with our social media and our marketing, and to help us get going. And our goal is to be able to bring her on full time and pay her. And the beauty of it is she's got 2 young kids at the house, so she'll be able to stay home, and this is a job she can do from anywhere. So whether they move or not doesn't matter to us. So that's another way that we hope we can give back. And she just has phenomenal ideas. And now, granted, not a knock on her, but it doesn't take a whole lot to provide a great marketing idea to someone like me who doesn't understand social media at all. So, but no, I love her ideas. She's really trying to help us. And so, we're taking slow steps, trying to get it moving. And we just spent a week out in Vegas at the Military Influencer Conference with a bunch of great people who work in the transition space. Tried really hard to be a high I and go out there and interact with everybody and try to, create some great content.
Well, you've done the first thing that everybody should do, is do it. And
Just do it.
You have been doing it, and now there's no doubt that it's going to do great things, and great things for a lot of people that need it. But I always applaud people.
Yes.
Even when we hear that and you're like, well, we just, we may not have it right, but we're out there doing it. I'm like, hallelujah. Yes, there's so many people. It's like, oh, I got to get it perfect before I can move. And we're like, no. Done is better than perfect. We just literally had this conversation with another client of ours out of Carlsbad, and we agree with it 100%. So I applaud you for getting out there and doing it, because it is going to be a really great service for all that. Already has been, no doubt.
It's how the podcast started too. We were talking and finally just record.
Yeah, just hit record.
Yep.
I think I shared with you, Shawn, in the call that you came on that meet and greet, where we're talking to potential guests, and I think I shared with your group that the first at least year of our podcast you can't find anywhere, I hope, because we removed them all because they were so bad.
They were terrible.
Like, the audio was terrible. Michael was in his car and he would just pull up at a gas station somewhere, and stationary point where he had 3 or 4 coverage bars on his phone, and put towels up in the windows to block the harsh light. And that was how our podcast started. And so 7 years later, we're still at it, and we like to think we're a little more professional than that these days. But that's in the eye of the beholder, I guess. But anyway, well, we have 2 final questions for you, Shawn, and one is a question we ask all of our guests: if our listeners have the freedom to visit any place in the world, which place would you recommend they visit and why?
I would say Ireland.
Second time Ireland's popped
Yeah, I
up.
like it.
All of Ireland. Now I have relatives that live there. Some cousins, I think second or third cousins, about my parents' age. We were fortunate enough before we left Germany to come back to the States to go over there for a week. And most of my relatives are from New England, so everybody in Ireland kind of talks like they're from that New England accent, type thing. So that was great. Felt completely at home. We actually got to hang out with the relatives, see all the historical stuff with the family, which is amazing. And there are two things. Well, there's three things that stick out from that specific trip. One, when we were in Dublin before we went to go see family, we got on a bus going the wrong way. We actually left Dublin, so we had no idea where we were going. When we get to the end, the bus driver is like, "Where are you going?" And then we told him, "Yeah, you went the wrong way." He sat there for 25 minutes on the side of the road talking with us until the bus came, which was just amazing. It's not something I think you find hardly anywhere.
Agreed.
The second part is my son was very attached. He always had to know where either my wife or I was. He was about 18 months when we went there. And we're sitting there talking, these cousins, they were sisters, lived together. And we're talking to one of them, and I'm looking around. I can't find my son anywhere. And we look out the front window, and he's walking down the road with the dog and the other sister. It didn't tell us, didn't care. He was completely at home and at ease. And it was just an amazing experience for us. And then the final story that always rings true. We went to meet their mother. And so she brought out tea for all the ladies. And she brought me a 10-year-old bottle of scotch and told me she had no ice. And it was only 9 a.m. So it shaped up to be a long day. But it was one of those experiences. It was just phenomenal. The food was amazing. So much culture and history. It's just a gorgeous area to go. Highly recommend people go visit Ireland.
Did you kiss the Blarney Stone?
Well, we haven't gone that far north yet, so that's on the next trip.
It's on the next trip. Well, you'll have the gift of gab, so it'll just help you that much more.
There you go.
According to the legend.
Every podcaster should, right?
Absolutely.
All right, Shawn, this has been great. We could go on forever. I hope that we have a round two. Definitely. Finally, last question. How does the audience connect with you if they want to learn more?
Let me start by thanking you both for having me on. I mean, you guys have a fantastic organization and something that I think so many people can benefit from, because it's all about growing in that branding piece. And from what I've seen so far, you two do an amazing job with that. So thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much.
There are a couple ways you can connect with me directly on LinkedIn, Shawn Welsh 00. We have a website for the podcast, vetsospodcast.com. Through there, you can connect to our YouTube to watch the videos or most of your major podcast platforms to listen to them if you'd like. Spread the word. We want to help anybody in the veteran, transitioning service member, and spouse community just to learn about what's available to them. There's so many resources, and all we want to do is try to help. My partner Eric has been doing transition for almost 4 years now. Working in this space, has tons of resources and loves to help people. So it's really one of those simple things. Connect with us on LinkedIn, shoot us a DM. Let's talk. Let's see what we can do.
Well, thank you again. It's been such a pleasure getting to know you. And I hope this is just the beginning of a great relationship, Shawn.
Definitely. Look forward to the next time.
Ready to change how you're seen and charge what you're worth? If you're not getting enough opportunities to meet with ideal customers, or the prospects you're meeting with just aren't ideal, it's most likely your brand that's holding you back. So if you're a coach, consultant, or expert who is on the rise, you need our ultimate guide to a freedom-based brand. Download it free now at BrandFaceGuide.com.